to the. Oh, I think that woke everybody up. Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Otto Lee. I'm the chair of the Finance Government Operations Committee FGOC meeting. I'm going to call to order right now, along with my vice chair supervisor, Susan Ellenberg. And with both supervisors present, we now have a quorum. Second is the public comment, and this is the item reserved for members of the public to address the committee that is not on the agenda today. Who wants to speak now? The law does not permit committee action or extended discussion on items that's not on the agenda, except for under special circumstances. Limber, would you please let me know how many speakers do we have today for the public comment?
We have one speaker in Zoom.
We have no speakers in Zoom and no speakers present.
One speaker in Zoom.
Oh, one speaker's in Zoom. Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and let that, because of the fact that we have less than 5 speakers, is set the time for 3 minutes. Go ahead.
The next speaker is Paul Soto. Please accept the unmute. You will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will begin when you begin speaking.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. What I'd like to talk about within the context of this meeting is that ARP funds and a lot of the programs that have been financed through those funds are going to be depleted. They're going to be running out. And as a result of that running out, a lot of programs that were financed by that money in one-time grant allocations are now going to start taking a hit. And at the time when the money was flowing, everything was cool. But what concerns me is the fact that the county still does not have a legally binding definition for racial equity. And here's why, is that the only way that justice is served, or the principles of racial equity are served, is within the budget process, within budget allocations. There is no other way to square it, because one of the primary ways in which racial inequity was experienced was economic. It was social due to the segregation. So we already know about the segregation that happened in Rose Garden, Willow Glen, all that, and it created these segregated pockets, which depleted them of resources that have had generational impacts. So we're already aware of that. So if the impact was generational and the impact was economic, then it only stands to reason that there should be an economic remedy for that. And what I don't appreciate is racial equity and its principles being abused. And now I've seen that abused with Supervisor Sabidian's allocations and a lot of his rationale. A lot of his rationale is that he will use racial equity principles or racial equity issues in order to support a particular project that he wants financed, and use that to do it. And that's an exploitation that I'm not really willing to tolerate, because there's still a lot that hasn't been articulated clearly. And what that is the quantification of what has happened to the Chicano and the Mexicano communities over the past 100 years as a result of those segregated processes. And the only way that that can be quantified is if we have a legally binding definition, so that we can really truly institute racial equity within the budget process, rather than leveraging it in order to gain influence in particular budget.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you, Limber. Anybody else? So let's go ahead and close the public hearing for the public comments period, and then move to the third item, which is approving the consent calendar and changes to the committee's agenda this morning. Yes, Supervisor Ellenberg.
Good morning. I would request that we move items 6 and 8 to the consent calendar. Item 6 is the capital improvement plan. Item 8 is the ARPA reallocation. Both of those reports were already discussed as parts of other, in our budget workshops. So with 6 and 8, I would move approval of the consent calendar.
Great, and I have no further changes to the consent calendar, other than what's been added, and I agree to those changes. So is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Okay, and I'll go and second that. I'll go and open a public hearing. Anybody would like to speak on this item?
We have one speaker via Zoom.
Okay, on the consent, it's 2 minutes. Go ahead.
The next speaker is Paul Soto. Please accept the unmute. Your timer will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. You have, with the 10-year capital projects, is the city hall falls under that. And so what I'd like to do is not let that off the radar. I'm getting a hold of organizations that are connected to Norman Mineta. I'm going to get Mike Honda, Dave Cortese. You know, I'm going to get some heavy hitters in the federal government in order to support my position that that is a civil rights museum. That's exactly what it is. And we don't have a museum. In the county of Santa Clara or the city of San Jose, we have no type of museum that is essential to where there can be like everybody's history told there. We have these segments. We have historical society. We have history San Jose, and they're too disparate. We need a centralized space that can be connected to the Smithsonian. Now, I've already been communicating with Dr. Stephen Peedy, who is on the board of the Latino American Museum that's being built on the mall in Washington, D.C. So he's an excellent source of conversation to try to facilitate this. So I don't want to lose sight of that building being a civil rights museum. And I'd like that talked about within this particular context. Secondly, is Howyer Park. That's moving along nicely. I'd like to thank Melissa Heppard and Don Rocha for their support in that. And there's going to be more details coming up on like exactly what that's going to look like soon. But I also don't want that to fall off the radar either, having Howyer Park designated as historical landmark because of the lowrider movement history associated with it.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Let's take the vote.
Vice Chairperson Ellenberg.
Yes.
Chairperson Lee.
Aye as well. And moving on to item number 4, which is receiving the fiscal year 2023-24 performance evaluation report from our auditor, Harvey Rose Associates LLC. And here to present the item, of course, is our Cheryl Soloff. Good afternoon. Oh, good morning. Sorry.
Good morning. I'm Cheryl Solov. I don't actually have a slideshow for you today, but I can provide just a general overview of this item, which is required by our contract. It runs through, this report runs through April 30th of the current year. And it allows us to provide an overview of kind of where we are in the current fiscal year, at least as of April 30th. Let's see here. If you want, I can go through a list of our items that we've issued in the current year.
It's all in the report, so I don't think we need
Yes.
to. So
Great.
unless Vice Chair, yes, you're okay? All right, yes, I think we're fine. I think we're ready to go straight to questions. All right,
Okay.
thank you so much. First of all, do we have any, actually, you want to get questions first or in public first?
Why don't we hear from the public first?
Sure. Anybody in public like to speak on this one?
We have one speaker via
Sure,
Zoom.
2 minutes, go ahead.
The next speaker is Paul Soto. Please accept the unmute. The timer will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. Thank you for the report. It was 700 pages long, so I didn't have an opportunity to get through the whole thing. But a few dozen, it stated this detail, a few dozen employees were employed in the county executive's office a decade ago, just a few dozen. Now it's got 685 full-time. 685 full-time in a 10-year period. And they noted that a lot of the staff are providing specific services that are outside the scope of the responsibilities of the county executive's office in the county charter. This is a serious issue that really needs, direct attention and some answers out of the county executive's office. Considering that kind of like, what's going on there? What's happening? Why are you providing services that are outside the scope of the county charter? That's against the law, ain't it? So, this, like, you don't get to determine what laws you're gonna follow and what laws you're not, and what laws you're gonna hide and what laws you're going to expose. Secondly, is that I would like the question answered because you stated also that the Office of Supportive Housing become a standalone department. Well, I'd like to know like exactly what you mean by that. Standalone as to what? What is the issue with it being as it is now? And what would be the benefit of it standing alone? That wasn't clearly articulated, and I would appreciate if that, in a practical sense, what does that look like? What does it look like to have an Office of Supportive Housing stand alone? And what, as a county citizen, what is the benefit to me?
That concludes public comment.
I'll close public hearing. Vice Chair Ellenberg?
Thank you. Cheryl, thank you for the report. I have some just kind of bigger picture questions about procedure, and I want to make sure that you don't hear my questions as any particular dissatisfaction or concern, but really trying to understand the relationship and the work. A performance evaluation is, in this case, and I believe historically, has been Harvey Rose's self-evaluation. Has there, so let's go back. How long has Harvey Rose contracted with the county?
Since 1980.
Since 1980. And is it always a year-to-year contract, or have there been longer periods of time?
I can't speak to the early years, but as for the last at least couple of decades, it's been a 5-year contract that's renewed annually. So it's a 5-year contract, but it has to be approved each year.
Got it. So the board has, I guess it's my second year on FGOC, but I feel like I'm still piecing things together. So the board renews this every year following a self-evaluation. I think that the board needs to step up our engagement. And again, it's not an indictment of your work. This is about really fiscal responsibility, policy responsibility. And I find it concerning that the board members haven't engaged in an evaluative process. I understand that because the board hires Harvey Rose, I think that means that we're not required to follow the same regular RFP process that the county does. But I would be very interested and happy to work with you on it, Cheryl, to think about how the board might provide an evaluation, how we might look to county council, since you work with them a lot, for input as well, and just be able to confidently tell the public each year that this is the best agency to do the work, and the board is satisfied with that work. I saw you put your light on
Yes, go ahead,
early. Do you
James.
want to add, and then I'll continue?
Sure, I was just going to provide a little background. I think it was maybe 10 years ago, I want to say, that this process was added. So previously, there was no item or self-evaluation kind of process. And I want to say it was about 10 years ago, I think, that this was added into the contract so that there'd be a public item on agenda at FGOC that would allow the committee to then engage. I think for many years this item has actually gone on consent at FGOC, but this is supposed to be a vehicle for the committee to then take the self-evaluation from Harvey Rose and add any additional input, and if the committee wishes to solicit input from county council or administration, that certainly could be part of the process too. But I just wanted to note kind of historically that for a long period of time, it didn't even exist either, and I just wanted to acknowledge that this was an effort to actually increase that exact kind of engagement.
Thank you. So I would like to iterate a little bit further. I would like the board to have some role in establishing metrics. What do we care about as a board? Do we care about the number of audits that are done each year? Do we care about the time in which they are produced? Do we care about the responsiveness of Harvey Rose? And again, Cheryl, I feel like I have to keep saying publicly, this is not an indictment on your work. This is really trying to improve the process. So metrics, I think, would be the first step to being able to determine our satisfaction. And I'm interested to know, with not having done an RFP for so long, I feel that even if we're not required to do so, there are advantages every once in a while to making sure that we are getting and working with the very best that's available to us. Megan, did you want to add something too? Is there a process that I don't know about?
Well, I just was going to state that there was an RFP that was done. It's since 1980. I'm looking at Cheryl, but I think it was about 10 years ago.
It has been bid a few times. The last one was in 2010.
Okay, so almost 15 years ago.
Yeah, and I would say that, just compliant, with the 5-year contract, the clerk of the board who manages the contract brings to the board a desire for the board to say we want to go out to bid or we don't want to go out to bid. So those conversations did happen at an open and public meeting. So when they didn't go out to bid, and then the board would authorize the clerk to then negotiate with Harvey Rose. So that was another public conversation where the board weighed in.
So I'm looking for some advice or recommendations here. Is further iteration of this process something that should be brought through a referral, through work with county council and Harvey Rose, through policy recommendations or direction from the dais? James, happy to hear your thoughts.
I think there's two different things that I think are worth separating. So one is the contracting cycle itself. And so as Megan referenced, the clerk brings an item to the board every 5 years on the question of whether to go out to bid or not. And I think that whole issue should be addressed through that cycle. I forget what year we're in right now.
Where are we in that cycle?
Are we in year 3?
Okay.
Yeah, the current contract was issued in October of 2020.
So it would come back
Year 4.
This will be year 4.
So yeah, it would come back in 2025.
Got it. Okay.
So I think that...
So that's an opportunity to have a public conversation and determine whether there would be any value in doing an RFP or simply renewing.
Right, so my recommendation is that piece get addressed there.
Separate that, yes.
And then the question on the eval piece, so this is a current process laid out in the contract. I think the committee can go ahead and for the next year's process, set forth, whatever additional information it would like to have as part of this agenda item and conversation, including if, the committee would like feedback from administration and or county council, including if the committee would like to establish, I think the next item on the agenda is the work plan,
right.
which I think would be an appropriate item if the committee wants to establish, other metrics. Right now, Harvey Rose tracks, certain metrics, obviously the hours involved in the audits and the completion of the audits. I think they also track implementation of recommendations. But, I think that would be, the work plan would be the appropriate item to address or add any additional metrics. And then this item, when it comes back next year, obviously I think it's late for this year, but, if the committee wishes there to be additional comments from county council and administration, I think that certainly could be incorporated.
And from other supervisors without a Brown Act violation, if we would ask them to submit any comments or feedback?
Yeah, I think you should work with county council on how to do that carefully to make sure it's Brown Act compliant. But public memoranda from the other supervisors, I think probably could be incorporated and attached to the item.
Megan?
And I would just add, the work plan then gets forwarded to the entire board of
Right.
supervisors. So, and there have been instances, it hasn't happened recently, where a member who's not on FGOC then gets, the work plan gets discussed more robustly at the board meeting and gets then, some things get added or deleted at that point. So that's where the public discussion amongst the board has taken place in the past.
Okay, that's all really helpful. Thank you. I'm going to come back to Cheryl. I understand your matrix and the factors you use to decide when it's time to audit a particular department, and very much appreciate how transparent that process is. Do the board's policy priorities come into play? Would that impact your, I guess it will if we direct it so, but has that had an impact on the cycle of audits that you use? For instance, that addressing mental illness and substance use disorders is a board priority. That criminal justice reform, alternatives to incarceration is a board priority. How do those factors figure, if at all?
Those factors are not part of the criteria for the risk assessment. They certainly could be.
Right.
But that's not what that isn't part of what's been approved. So we just apply the approved criteria.
And the criteria are set in the 5-year contract or in the annual work plan?
It's pursuant to policy. So the committee has approved the criteria.
Okay. So separate
so
from the
it's-
contract. The contract doesn't lay out the criteria.
Right. The criteria are approved by FGOC.
And they were updated maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
I think it was, I can't remember if it was 3 years or 4 years ago.
But a few years ago, they were updated, and they mainly focus on fiscal factors, associated with the cost centers, growth or changes in those cost centers, and duration since last audit are some of the key factors.
All of which may be perfectly appropriate. I'm certainly not going to hold anything back today or implement something, a dramatically new direction, but I will have my team just do some work on how we might iterate the evaluation process, certainly for next year, if not this year. But I really do appreciate the work. I appreciate the transparency that is in each of the reports. And again, I just want to make sure that the board, as your contracting partner, is doing our part in making sure that there is the highest value that we should expect. Thank you. That's all I have.
Understood. And as far as
Yeah.
the risk assessment goes, that's just one tool. The committee can select anything it wants.
Got it.
Yeah, and I was going to
So we get, so if there are priorities that the committee or the board has, and as an example, the extra help audit that was, requested,
Right.
that was not something that was on the risk assessment. That's a request. So,
Steve, you have lights on? Sorry.
Just one quick a reminder that if the committee or the board wishes to engage in a discussion on the RFP process, just like Mr. Williams separated out,
Right.
that needs to happen, obviously well before the contract comes up for renewal next year. So, because it takes a long time to get the RFP done.
In the clerk's
Go
office.
ahead, James, yeah.
Brings that item to the board usually well in advance. I was just going to mention one other historical thing. I've sat with FGOC since 2012, and it is regularly the case, I would say more often than not, that the specific audits ordered up for Harvey Rose to conduct are not necessarily the ones at the top of the risk assessment, and that instead reflect particular issues or priorities given the moment that are identified by the committee. So just in my experience and seeing what has happened over the years, most of the audits, I would say, have been requested or changed based on some particular concern, issue, or other thing that's going on that board members have identified.
Thank you,
I
James.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, that's all. Well, first of all, I just want to thank Cheryl for your work and your entire team in Harvey Rose for the hard work over the past year and also the various years prior. First off, these audits certainly are extremely important for us, for our county, to make sure our internal processes can be improved from an independent perspective. And what I would like to do is request the Management Audit Division to provide an estimated time of completion concerning the rest of the confidential drafts and the rest of the audits that are currently in the fieldwork phase in an off-agenda memorandum. They don't certainly need to be exact as the estimates goes, but a ballpark estimate would be very helpful for us to think about the FGOC work plan for the year ahead as well. That's okay. And if that's said, is there a motion to receive the report?
So moved.
And I'll go ahead and second that. And let's go take the vote.
Vice Chairperson Ellenberg,
Yes.
Chairperson Lee,
Yes, as well. Thank you. And moving right on to item number 5, which is the Management Audit Division proposed work plan for fiscal year 24-25. And Sheriff Soloff, you're still Sheriff Soloff. Go ahead.
So the proposed FY 24-25 work plan was based on feedback received at the Finance and Government Operations Committee meeting in April. And this would provide 16,200 hours of assignments, including almost 8,000 hours of new management audits based on direction from the committee, and about 3,000 hours of carryover audit hours, among other things. And it also includes this, our standard annual work, including the review of the budget and hours available for the board or the committee or individual board offices to request particular one-off assignments.
Yes. Yep.
I'm happy to take any feedback that you may have on the proposed work plan, and this would go then to the board either as amended by you today or as approved as is today. It would then go to the board in June for adoption and or revision.
Okay, thank you. Let me see. Do we have any public who would like to speak on this item?
we have no speakers.
Yes, go ahead. Let's do 2 minutes.
He said no speakers.
One speaker, right?
No
Oh, no speaker. I'm sorry. I thought I heard one. Okay, then we're going to close the public hearing. I'm sorry. And then I'll go ahead and ask Vice Chair, you have any comments on this?
A couple of questions. There's 50 hours budgeted to oversight for the new VMC Behavioral Health Center. Can you talk about what that entails and what you're looking for, since it's something by description is new, a new center?
You're talking about the oversight?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that was approved by the board in December of 20, I believe, for, and so we're managing a subcontractor that provides oversight of that development. We're managing veneer construction.
I can provide some background on that item. There was a supervisor in particular who was quite concerned about the construction timelines
Let me guess.
associated with that particular project, and Harvey Rose was asked to retain a subcontractor to provide reports on the timeline for completion of that construction. So that's what that item is.
So it's an independent assessment of their progress along these lines. So those are just the hours for me to oversee the subcontractor.
Got it. And this is the project, same project in which we've are redirecting ARPA
Yes, yes.
dollars and have had some significant contract increases recently that we looked at last week.
This project has a long and complex history. It's a very expensive
Yes.
project, yes.
And I apologize if I have not
It is well
noted
under
the
construction, though.
feedback
You
to
can,
that.
it's, the entire exterior has been built, as you can physically see on the
Right.
VMC campus.
Question to County Council on this. One of the concerns I know that board members have expressed is the amount of time between an audit being delivered to council by Harvey Rose and coming to the board. County Council, Mr. Lopresti, had talked about trying to streamline or standardize that process with the understanding that there will be exceptions, there will be items that are particularly complex or technical in their subject matter, but do you have any further information on the goals there?
Yeah, I believe that, we have an understanding with Harvey Rose about expediting that process, and further, that an off-agenda memo is on its way to you to lay out the process.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure that was on the way.
The timing on that is approximately next week sometime.
Thank you so much. And just a general question. This is, we received for this meeting a written public comment by someone who is asking about notification for new off-agenda reports. Could you just walk us through, if that's not too off topic, for this meeting, how off-agenda reports are easily made known to the public? I assume that if there's somewhere that they're listed by chronological date, so anybody
There's
looking.
a website that
Yep,
the
thank
clerk
you.
of the board maintains where all public off-agendas are posted. It's fully searchable. It's very easy to use. I used it just the other day to send some information to a board member with some off-agendas from 2020. Very, very easy to use, and you can just Google, Santa Clara County off-agenda reports. I mean, that's how I found,
Perfect.
find it.
And the newest
separate
ones are
from-
at the top if somebody is just looking
You
to
can
see
search
what
by
was
date, you
released.
can
Okay.
search by, keyword.
Fantastic.
It's a very accessible site. I do want to note, County Council does regularly provide, obviously, confidential memoranda related to legal issues, and those are, of course, not on that
Of
site.
course. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. First, again, I want to thank Cheryl and your entire team for responding to the questions of our team related to the proposed work plan for this year. We are able to accommodate 5 new audits that are still, but there are still 6 remaining audits that are being carried over from last year. And so just if you could just continue providing us updates about the expected completion of these audits, would be most appreciated. And that's all I have for now. Is there a motion to receive report?
So moved.
And I'll second it.
Vice Chairperson Ellenberg?
Yes.
Chairperson Lee?
Yes, as well. Item number 6 has been added to consent, so we're moving to item number 7, which is receiving the report from the Office of County Exec relating to the Santa Clara County Fairgrounds Management Corporation finances. And today, I believe, to present the report, we have, of course, our County Executive, James Williams. Let's see who is over there. I see Glenn Williams standing there. and also Abe Andrade, and I'll let you.
So I don't know how the committee wishes to proceed kind of best with presentation, but there's multiple components to this report, and different people have the lead on different pieces of the report. So there's pieces related to the financials and current activities associated with FMC. There's a component of the report associated with governance structure, and there's a portion of the report associated with current negotiation status. So depending on which items, there's different folks to lead the conversation. So
Sure. Vice Chair, do you have any preference based on
I'm
comments?
happy to go right to questions.
Okay, you're ready to go right to questions. First of all, let me go and open up a public hearing first. Anybody in public would like to speak on this?
We have one speaker via Zoom.
Okay, we do have one speaker. Let's give him 2 minutes to start with that.
The next speaker is Paul Soto. Please accept the unmute. The timer will begin when you begin speaking.
Yes, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. About maybe 6 months ago, Supervisor Ellenberg asked some very pointed, very direct questions about the financials of the fairgrounds and how it's being managed and how it's being accounted for. And so I hope that those questions can be answered within the context of this conversation, because those questions that were raised, they require answers, direct answers, not vague ambiguities, but direct answers to the questions that Supervisor Ellenberg raised. Secondly, is that space, the amount of time that is going to be allocated for the public use is very, very limited. Now, the earthquakes, there's going to be like a bunch of soccer stadiums, there's going to be, the cricket stadium, there's going to be all this stuff that's going on there. And so, like, the amount of time that we, the public, are getting for the kind of investment that we are paying to give these people a brand new state-of-the-art stadium, I think needs to be recalibrated, because the community benefit should be at its maximum level. And from what I had surmised by the presentation of the earthquakes, the owner of the earthquakes had showed up to San Jose City Council. And the hours was just like, are you guys serious? That's the amount of hours that you're gonna give to the public. And then after that, they have to charge to rent it. But it doesn't make any sense, because that's our money. That's our money that went into creating that space so that they can have it in the first place. So I think there needs to be a reevaluation of and a maximization of public access to it.
That concludes public comment.
Yes, go and close the public hearing. Vice Chair Ellenberg, please, for your questions.
Thank you. I'm actually going to start with a quote from the ledge file directly that really concerned me, and it's this quote: "One of the major challenges with the current organizational structure is that there is a disconnect between the county's ownership of the fairgrounds, the county's longer-term work related to the fairgrounds, the work of other county departments that affect the fairgrounds, and the county's significant fiscal contributions to the fairgrounds overall, on the one hand, and the fact that currently there is no oversight or other direct connection between administration and leadership and the leadership of FMC to effectively integrate and coordinate this work on the other hand." The fairgrounds property, I think would be safe to say, is one of our very highest valued pieces of real property. That's a fair assessment?
it's certainly a large, significant property in a very central location.
And since long before I joined the board, there have been many stops and starts, ideas for projects, potential projects. As right now, we have a number of potential projects as well, but I am concerned about that lack of coordination that's referenced in the ledge file, and I have some questions, not necessarily for now, but information that I'd like to start being included regularly. And certainly, we'll just say generally, as we are with all capital expenditures, given our structural deficit and the economic uncertainty of the next few years, we need to keep looking closely for opportunities to improve current operations and long-term budgeting and development plans. FMC has generally appeared to break even or make a slight profit in recent years, but the county's general fund investments have supported that financial performance, and really a significant amount of money is spent on fairgrounds maintenance through fleet and facilities, in effect a subsidy that doesn't appear in FMC's budgeted costs. So I'm not sure we're really seeing clearly what the profitability is of fairgrounds management right now. We have asked other departments to reevaluate their operations and make really challenging reductions. So I think that this board, the FMC board and administration, should be taking the same approach to evaluating operations and capital investments. So I have a few general areas in which I would like to see more detailed regarding fairgrounds operations, and ideally these would be, I think I've got 5 of them, would be included in FMC items, agenda items going forward. First, more detail and transparency into vendor contracts. Second, information on the profitability of different activities taking place. 3, a detailed overview of necessary maintenance and capital improvements. 4, an updated timeline regarding progress on any of the long-term redevelopment plans and how we're managing investments in the interim, and reporting back as is relevant, any opportunities to improve the detail and transparency in financial information that reaches FGOC and the Board of Supervisors, as well as a process to approach or consider reevaluating the structure of the unique relationship between FMC and the county. James, happy for your take or thoughts on that as we really try to wrestle this down.
Yeah, I think kind of stepping back for a moment and talking bigger picture for a second. The structure that we currently have essentially is FMC, right, is the managing entity that's dealing with things like the vendor relationships and the specific kind of revenue generating activities, with the goal of really those activities supporting the annual county fair. And that's evolved over time, but there's that governance kind of disconnect between FMC, which is a separate 501c entity, and it's with its separate board of directors appointed by the Board of Supervisors, but separate board of directors, and those activities. And I think where we're now seeing challenges is the county is now stepping in, as the landowner, and engaging in a whole series of negotiations with a bunch of entities that ultimately, if successful, would result in the development of a huge swath of that fairgrounds property, and there isn't integration between those negotiations and conversations and the effect that they may have on FMC's operations and revenues, for example, because certainly much of that acreage is currently generating revenue that's included in FMC's current operations. And there's that kind of disconnect between what's happening with those negotiations and what impact it may then have on FMC's operations. And there's been an increasing desire on the part of the board looking to administration to provide analysis of some of those impacts, including some of the things that you're requesting now, for example, detail on vendor contracting, which is really a question that only FMC can answer and provide because it's the one managing those relationships. And so I think the bigger picture question, and we can certainly work with FMC in providing all of these categories of information to the committee. I don't think that's an issue. But I think the bigger picture question is, given the magnitude and significance of these negotiations that are happening with the property, is there a desire on the part of the board to revisit kind of the governance
Right.
structure that's involved. And so we've put some thoughts out there. You know, there's very limited options available given the broader structure of having a separate entity, which I think does have a lot of benefits in terms of actually handling the day-to-day associated with both the fair and these other vendor operations. So there's some limited options, but there are some options that are available to try to have a different approach and framework there. And so, you know, I think we're looking for an indication of whether there's interest on the part of this committee and further exploration of those options, in addition to, of course, you know, providing this more detailed information on what vendor activities and you know, maintenance needs and other issues associated with the fairgrounds.
Thank you. I saw my colleague nodding, so hopefully he will share interest in exploring that. I definitely am interested, and we're not only directly engaged, the county administration, in these negotiations that you referenced, but also more and more in the maintenance and operations and things that truly were, in my understanding, delegated to FMC, but we are either handling or financing anyway. So I am very interested, and I don't have an answer, and I don't have a particular direction or preference. I just think that now is an opportune moment to really think about how we want to move forward. And I understand it's public news that Mr. Andrade is retiring by the end of June, so I want to not miss the moment to thank you for your leadership and oversight, and to wish you the best. It feels like that makes this, you know, even more so sort of an opportune moment to think about what comes next. Supervisor Lee, I would love to hear your thoughts on any of that.
Sure, thank you. And no, I think there's a lot to be said from the report of how many things we have learned, and certainly there's the restructure being proposed as something that I believe is needed, and the timing is really apropos, along with the retirement of our Abe Andrade, for your awesome work for the past few years managing our FMC here, especially during COVID, right? During that time when we had so many changes and able to make that space available for our nurses and healthcare providers to provide the testing first, and then thereafter the administration of the vaccines, and then your first dose and second dose. So the amount of changes and accommodation that's been made, along with running other things at the FMC, certainly is no small feat, including county fair right afterwards, and auctioning off all those livestock. Anyway, so I just want to say thank you so much for all the amazing work as well. And I really do want to thank our team for coming up with these proposals, of coming up with a new idea of this new FMC, 3-member FMC board. My only question really at this point is, James, is how do you come with the 3 members? I mean, I read the report about how the 3 members, it would be better or be able to have more public participation. We make a 5-member board instead of 3. What's your thought on that?
Sure. I mean, it certainly could be different size, but I think the intention of the recommendation is to align the structure such that the oversight over the executive director and administration of FMC would become the responsibility of county administration. It would still remain a Brown Act body, so those meetings would still be public meetings, but it would shift the policy conversation considerations, some of which happen in this forum, some of which happen at the full board, but many of which currently happen at the FMC Board of Directors. It would align all of that to be happening at FGOC and the Board of Supervisors. So, you know, the recommendation for 3 versus 5 is just for simplicity's sake, as opposed to anything else in particular. It would just require identifying more county officers to sit on the body if it was 5 as opposed to 3.
Potentially, right. So I guess my only addition to, do we have a motion, right? So is Ellenberg accommodating all your requests there? Yes? I assume, and second that. And I would just ask that let's get the option of 3 versus 5 on when we go to the full board, and let the public to have a comment on that issue, and then we could vote on it as a whole body as well. And that's all I have. I'll go and second that.
Vice Chairperson Ellenberg?
Yes.
Chairperson Lee?
Yes, as well. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you very much again for your great work. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 9, which is the legislative monthly report from the Office of Intergovernmental Relations. I'll give a few seconds for our team to transition out. Thank you. And for the presentation of this item today, we have Monica Tong, our Program Manager 3, along with Elaine Trin, Senior Management Analyst. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and Vice Chair. As you mentioned, Monica Tong, on behalf of Intergovernmental Relations and the Office of the County Executive, we appreciate you having us here today. Please note that these slides in the presentation reflect a point in time when they were created and submitted, so there have been updates since then, and I will go over those shortly. I am joined today by Elaine Trin, and Elaine and I are here to provide the monthly IGR update. Every other month, including today, we provide a written legislative file report and presentation, and the other months we provide an oral report only. Next slide, please. Thank you. Quickly, IGR, as you know, oversees the county's legislative programs in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. We utilize the 2024 Legislative Priorities document to engage on legislation and budget priorities. Since our last update to you, the legislature has had quite a busy month. May 3rd was the last day for policy committees to hear and report bills introduced in their House with no fiscal impact. And then the deadline for Governor Newsom to release his May budget revision was May 14th. I'll come back to that a little later. May 17th was the last day for fiscal committees to hear and report bills. The suspense bill hearings were held on May 16th. And May 24th was the House of Origin deadline, where all bills for each house had to pass those in their house. There are a few upcoming key dates on the legislative calendar highlighted in blue. The June 15th budget bill deadline is coming up soon, and July 3rd is the last day for policy committees to hear and report bills, and that will be when the legislature's summer recess begins upon adjournment. This time will be used for discussion about bills, and meetings with the governor's office will continue. The legislature will return on August 5th for the last sprint, 4 weeks until the end of the legislative session. We will now provide a quick update on the status of the county-sponsored and co-sponsored bills. AB 3035 by Assemblymember Gail Pellerin furthers the work of Speaker Rivas by streamlining the development of affordable housing for agricultural employees in a pilot program for Santa Clara and Santa Cruz counties. Quickly, this bill passed out of appropriations on May 8th and was ordered to the consent calendar on the Assembly floor, where it passed on May 16th. It is now with the Senate Committee on Rules awaiting Policy Committee referral. SB 1317 by Senator Aisha Wahab would extend a sunset date on the process for obtaining involuntary medication orders for individuals with severe mental health disorders in our custody. The bill passed the Senate floor on a 39-0 vote on May 20th and is in the Assembly Committee on Rules awaiting Policy Committee referral. These are our co-sponsored bills. AB 491 by Assemblymember Wallace was referred to the Senate Committees on Local Government and Judiciary. It will be heard in local government tomorrow, May 29th. AB 1957 by Assemblymember Wilson passed the Assembly floor on consent on May 2nd and was referred to the Senate Committee on Local Government, where it will also be heard tomorrow, May 29th. AB 3079 by Assemblymember Ting was held by Assembly Appropriations and will not be moving forward this year. AB 3260, also by Assemblymember Gail Pellerin, passed the Assembly floor with a 57-1 vote on May 21st and is with the Senate Committee on Rules awaiting Policy Committee referral. SB 294 by Senator Wiener is scheduled to be heard by the Assembly Committee on Health on June 4th. SB 333 by Senator Cortese is awaiting a hearing by Assembly Education, but the county joined a coalition budget request to fund the program in this bill shall it pass, and we are still monitoring the status of that budget request. SB 1193 by Senator Menjivar passed the suspense file, which is generally a large hurdle, and the bill passed the Senate floor with a 29-8 vote on May 22nd and is with the Assembly Committee on Rules awaiting Policy Committee referral. Now, returning back to the governor's May revise, he released a summary of his May revise on Friday, May 10th, with the details coming in on May 14th and 15th. IGR is currently working with departments on specific impacts. For example, we partnered with the Public Health Department on submitting a letter regarding the funding for the future of public health, and we appreciate their partnership on that endeavor. Budget negotiations are ongoing, and IGR will continue to monitor progress as we get closer to the June 15th budget bill deadline. But we have focused our efforts on opposing the governor's proposal to divert excess ERAF from the county and local governments. IGR is also involved in discussions regarding the end of vital emergency services at Regional Medical Center. And at this time, we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Monica. And do we have any public speakers on this issue first?
We have one public speaker via Zoom.
2 minutes, please. Go ahead.
The next speaker is Paul Soto. Please accept the unmute. The timer will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. I want to refer to Revis's bill. There's an issue that I have with that. He stated, it says here that builds upon the Farm Worker Housing Act of 2019 Revis, which streamlined the development of affordable housing for agricultural employees. Unfortunately, no applications for farm worker housing were submitted in Santa Clara County. That concerns me. I'm bothered by that. Look, we brag about our history, Valley of Hearts to life. You know, I'm sitting like it's almost like, it's almost like we're being mocked. Like the contributions that, look, Cesar Chavez started his entire organizing career in this county, in Barrio Salsipuedes. It is the heart of the farm worker movement. His 10 years with the CSO, which began at Mayfair School, June of 1952, with the assistance of Father McDonald and Fred Ross, led to the farm workers movement. And this county is like dragging their feet on that issue. Now, I do want to acknowledge Supervisor Ellenberg when I noted that there was no budgetary like placeholder, like an estimate on that one capital budget assessment that you had asked for one. Now I'm looking for it and I can't find it, but that's what I'm looking for, that because I'm following that issue all the way through, because it's extremely personal to me, because I'm a reflection of that community. And so I really want to see some effort on the county and start putting some substance behind that Valley of Heart.
That concludes our public comment.
Thank you, Ellenberg. We're going to close the public hearing. Yes, Vice Chair Ellenberg, do you have any questions on this one?
I do. Thank you so much for the great report and really making clear the breadth of work that our IGR is doing. I do have a few questions. Do you know what the status is of our delegation's support for ERAF, for the excess ERAF issue? I know we were trying to get as many of our delegation members as possible to publicly support.
Sure, that's a great question. That letter is being circulated now, and we are following up with members on getting their signatures.
And by when ideally, should that letter be on the governor's desk, or is it the speaker that we're getting to first?
I believe the letter that is being circulated is going to the budget chairs. So
okay.
Senator Weiner
And Wahab. So two of our delegation members are on the budget committee, so I assume they're not signing it,
That's
hopefully.
correct.
And the speaker likely won't, but hopefully the rest will.
Sure.
And again, let me know, let any of my colleagues know if you'd like our outreach on any of our delegation members. I didn't see MCO updates on your sheet, on any of the slides. Did I miss that, or is there a different update? James put his light on. I'll go that way first.
My light was on for the ERAF
Oh,
issue, but
sure. Talk
but I can speak briefly to the MCO tax issue as well. Now is the time for folks to engage aggressively on the excess ERAF issue. I think to the extent that either member of the committee or any other member of the board has any interactions with anybody in the legislature, it would be very appropriate and timely to raise the topic right now. The item is currently being considered. There is an active trailer bill, and there will be legislative activity on the topic between now and the adoption of the budget. So now is the window to lean in, and I would just share the same to the public. We know that CBOs and others who rely on county services and funding, now is the time to very strongly weigh in on that as well. On the MCO tax, there's a lot of details that are still unclear in terms of the governor's proposal there and trying to basically capture the increased revenues associated with that tax for the benefit of the state. And there's conversations that are happening through the California Association of Public Hospitals, as well as the more broader hospital organizations regarding that tax. And one of the complicating additional factors there is there's a proposed ballot initiative that would make the MCO tax permanent and that would lock in some of the formulas associated with the tax that would, as currently drafted anyway, would not allow several of the administration's attempts to repurpose some of that revenue to be able to go into effect. So my understanding is there's some conversations, I guess, between the governor's office and the proponents of the initiative trying to seek some kind of alternative pathway. Those, I believe, have to conclude by late June in order to make the
Would a ballot measure be better
deadline.
for us, potentially,
The
or worse?
currently drafted ballot measure is better for us than the governor's
Okay.
current proposal. So, we'll see kind of what happens. But my understanding, like I said, is that the governor's office is trying to get the proponents of the ballot initiative to change
Okay.
language to accommodate their desire to capture a bunch of that additional revenue for the state's budget.
Thank you. Is there an update on the legal status of the California Business Roundtable disaster tax?
It's still pending before the California Supreme Court. They had oral argument a few weeks ago, and a decision will necessarily need to come pretty soon, but we're waiting on that decision. That being said, administration is working on bringing an item to the full board to have the board take, administration's recommending that the board take an opposed position on that, which is, I think, a no-brainer given
Yep.
the extraordinarily serious consequences that would result
Absolutely.
if that measure is adopted.
Thank you. I saw that the regional trauma center issues was on the radar. Thank you for that. Assemblymember Alex Lee has expressed particular interest, hopefully to you as well, about being engaged there, and I know that there's been outreach to the Attorney General, so really just wanted to lift that up to say thank you there. Is there an update on the hang on one second. Regional housing bond measure is going through the process. 2026 regional transit tax measure. Is there any information yet about that, or is nobody talking about it until after this election?
There's a bill that's being, vigorously debated in the legislature regarding regionalization of transit, but it includes a bunch of taxing authority for MTC,
Right.
a whole range of possible taxes, from parcel taxes to payroll taxes to sales taxes to support transit. And it's a bill that has received some significant opposition from folks in the South Bay, given concerns associated with those taxing mechanisms and where the money would be raised, which is heavily here, and where the money might go to subsidize transit entities in the North Bay. So that's, that bill, I believe, cleared the Senate last week, and so it's headed to the Assembly, where my understanding is some amendments were promised, but we're not aware of the details of those amendments. So we're monitoring the bill at this time. It doesn't fall within the county's legislative priorities for obvious reasons, given that VTA is a separate entity. But VTA, my understanding is VTA has opposed the bill, and I know that a number of folks from the delegation and elsewhere from Santa Clara County region have serious concerns with the bill.
Right. And Supervisor Chavez made what I thought was an excellent point at our last board meeting about the importance of focusing not only on state and federal, but really on these regional issues as well. So I know you're mid-session, mid-work plan now, but I would like that to be thought out with a little bit more care and detail as to how we can make sure that we are having a voice in these important regional measures where we may not have control as the governing entity, but certainly have influence, and we are the largest of the 9 Bay Area counties, and I think we should act like that and make sure that our relevance is felt in every room.
Yeah, I would just share a couple comments on that. One is I think we recognize that there's a need for additional resources. Our IGR team is small, and I also just think we have to acknowledge that we also have to prioritize what things we aggressively weigh in on. So we obviously weigh in on lots and lots of bills, but we've also been very clear that there's a couple of highest priority items for us in the current budget process, SCC RAF being number 1,
Absolutely.
MCO tax and public health funding being the other 2, given their very significant impact on the county. So,
and I don't disagree with that.
and I just name it because it's, we have to acknowledge that some of the holding together and bringing together the Bay Area-wide delegation on an issue like SCC RAF, and the split in the Bay Area delegation on the issues associated with transit funding, obviously both important and significant issues, but I think we need to be real clear also about what's the county's number 1 focus.
I think that's very fair, and finding agreement there, we certainly don't want to be hampered by potential differences on other items. It certainly is tricky, and I think that's so often the political situation, that you are in deep agreement with parties on some issues and at odds on others, and we have to be able to work with all of that. The last piece that I wanted to mention is not on your radar and appropriately not right now, but I'm interested in an off agenda in understanding more about potential legislative solutions or gap filling around the DFCS licensing for scattered sites issues. That may be something post-budget, but a place where IGR may need to get involved if we have specific solutions to recommend, which I hope we do. So is that something that's in process coming to the board as an off agenda? And if not, I'd like to request that.
It is in process, and I think as Supervisor Simidian alluded to during the last quarterly report, He carried years ago special legislation that ultimately got limited to San Mateo County, although the original proposal would have applied statewide. That provided some additional options related to some of those exact issues. And so there may be a need, depending on how the conversations are going right now with CDSS, for special legislation to address some of those issues.
Okay, and about when can we expect that off agenda?
I think the off agenda is associated with the budget, so we're trying to get it out this week,
Okay.
along with like 25 others.
Yes, I know. It is definitely the busy season. That's it. Thank you again so much, Monica and Elaine. Really appreciate you both.
Yes, thank you. And I want to also send my gratitude as well to our IGR team that's been extremely active, especially this time of year, given how important it is to make sure that our voice is heard from Santa Clara County, and certainly have seen a lot more engagement and movement now from our county. So I just want to thank our team for the good work, along with Dave Campos and everybody that's worked so hard. And some actually living and working in Sacramento every day to make this happen. So I just want to say thank you for the team first. On the issue of ERAF, as we understand how important this is, I've been texting and cajoling our assembly members. So please keep us posted how your signature gathering is and how we could do more cajoling if necessary, to obviously get the maximum number of participants from our county delegation to support this. I think it's important. And if you think that might be helpful to get outside county delegation support as well, that's from LA, for example, we have some existing relationship that we might be able to pull as well. So let's not forget that also. Okay. Another area I did want to mention is this Senate Bill 1193 by Manavar regarding the, that which really came from us, of the banning of the unleaded fuel for aviation purposes. For general aviation purposes, I noted that out of all the bills that have been mentioned, that's probably the most, quote, controversial, with the number of no's coming up committee, 29 to 8. And that's a Senate committee. How is it looking at the Assembly side? Is that something that you think we have a decent chance of passing, or do we need to do more lobbying?
Thank you for the question. It's a very good one. If I had a magic 8-ball, I would love to predict what's going to happen in the Assembly, but as we move through the policy committees, we will be monitoring that closely with Senator Menjivar's office, and we'll be sure to provide an update as it gets referred and then heard.
Good. Yeah, I think it's certainly important that we engage tightly, because when there's so many bills going on at the same time, as we know, sometimes things don't get through to these legislators because there's just so much going on. And you know, it was really a tragedy sometimes because of the deadline of midnight. They take that so seriously. There are cases where even though we have very much close to unanimous consent, because it missed the deadline, the bill died and had to go through all over again. So I just want to make sure that this is not one of those situations potentially that could happen to it. So I just want to make that point clear.
Sure, we'll make note of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And besides that, I mean, there's just so many issues. Just keep us posted what's going on. If there's any additional push that we need for our friend in the legislature, we just want to make sure that that's brought up to our attention. But thank you for the great work. Those tax issues, as exciting as they really are exciting for us, because it really means to break or not break our bank in future budgets for so many years. So thank you for the hard work on that. And with that said, do you have a motion to receive the report?
Motion to receive the report.
Okay, and I'll go and second that. Let's take a vote.
Vice Chairperson Ellenberg?
Yes.
Chairperson Lee?
Yes, as well. Before we adjourn, I just want to mention and ask for a moment of silence for the most recent news item of the Rafah bombing. It was reported yesterday there was a bombing on the densely populated Rafah refugee camp that killed at least 45 people, with hundreds more injured. More than half were women, children, and elderly people. according to the health officials. And the Israeli military actually know there was investigating reports that a strike get carried out against Hamas militant commanders in Rafah had caused a fire, and there's been worldwide condemnation of this tragedy. The Prime Minister of Israel actually noted that the strike was, quote, a mistake or error, depending on translations, but regardless whether it's a mistake or error, this is beyond tragic, and I would like to take a moment of silence on those who are suffering and have fallen before we adjourn. Thank you. And now takes us to the end of the agenda. We're ending our meeting at 11:15. Till our next meeting will be on June 25th, 2024 at 10 a.m. Thank you.
I saw your speech at Palestinian Cultural Day. It was very fiery.